of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is your microphone on?
Yep. There we go. Okay. Good evening. Will the secretary please call roll?
Commissioner Hodge,
Here.
Commissioner Rice,
Here.
Commissioner Gray,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Tolson,
Here.
Chairperson Mann.
Here. May I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Motion is made by Commissioner Hodge. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Tolson. Unless there's any objections, the agenda stands approved. May I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
Motion is made by Commissioner Rice. May I have a second?
Second.
A second was made by Commissioner Gray. Unless there are any objections, the minutes are approved. Declaration of conflict. The secretary will read the declaration of conflict.
If any member of the Planning Commission may have a conflict of interest or any reason why that member must abstain from consideration of any matter on this agenda, he or she should so declare at this time.
Are there any declarations of conflict? Hearing none, public statements. This is the time allotted for public statements for all other items other than, where's my number? For all items other than public hearing items. Do we have any public statements?
Chairman Mann, first of all, can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. We did receive a public comment request, and it is combined with our supplemental to agenda item 9.1 regarding the general plan progress report. That statement is combined with that item. And that's the only items I have. Did we receive any other Zoom comments?
Nobody on Zoom?
No, we did not.
Perfect. Correspondence. Is there any correspondence?
Yes, Chairman Mann, members of the commission, we did receive, we present to you two supplemental staff reports, one for item 9.1 and one for item 10.A.1. The first one regarding the general plan annual progress report, and the second one regarding the proposed beekeeping ordinance.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
Moving on. May I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay, motion was made by Vice Chair Tolson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gray. I know already that there's a couple people that have some questions or comments on it, so we'll hold off on approving the consent calendar. If you have any questions or comments, speak now. Commissioner Rice?
Yes. Let's see. I'm going right page here. Looking at the wrong page. Sorry about that. Okay, on page 5, which is how we've met our arena goals. These are our arena goals up through the end of last year. Is that correct?
Our Associate Planner Eric Chen is coming to the microphone.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you fine. Good evening.
Good evening. So yes, it is up through the end of 2020.
Okay. It is much an observation, I suppose, as anything. But one of the things I've noticed since I've been on the commission is that we always tend to, or at least it seems like we always go over the above moderate income. and we always struggle with moderate income and the others. I know that the state, through some new assembly bills, has created incentives for developers, but is there some way we as a city could try to encourage people who build above moderate income homes, at least include one, or, if they build more than, say, 20 units, that they include, a moderate income unit or something like that, just to help us meet our goals? Is that something that we've seriously considered?
Certainly. I believe that according to our Director of Environmental Services, Stratus Peros, he did mention that we are currently going through a general housing element update, and then we will be looking into the possibility of having some sort of a inclusionary housing ordinance for the city. And therefore, through that, we can potentially set aside additional affordable housing. And regarding financial assistance, the city can potentially look into that as well.
Okay. On page 11, it's just a question, and I don't know that this is really a planning commission thing, but the promotion of tourism in the Shop Simi Valley, how do they measure success on something like that? Or is it just we make the assumption that if we advertise and that businesses and encourage people that is going to, I don't really understand how, if you set a goal, you must have some measure of success or what you intend to do. Even if it's anecdotally, do restaurants come back and say, wow, this has been successful, or businesses say, yeah, we've got more business because of the Simi Valley First program? I haven't seen that. I'm just, if we know.
Yeah, Commissioner Rice, as far as this report goes, we didn't get that detailed into the
Okay, that's
measure of success. I would certainly hope that the team that handles that throughout these years have, surveyed themselves to see how that program's proceeding, and with the various continuation of that program, I'm sure that's something they look at on a regular basis.
I'm sure it's probably a better question for the city council rather than the planning commission. I'm just curious. On page 16, there's a question about, which was about, let's see, the Walkable Community Program. And the status says that the city continues to promote a pedestrian-friendly community by planning and implementing projects to close gaps in continuous sidewalk areas and upgrading streetscape where possible. Where have we closed gaps in continuous sidewalk areas except through new construction, or is that what we're talking about there?
A lot of it's new construction, and there's various public works fundings for certain upgrades. I don't have like a listing of those tonight, but once in a while there is some gap filling which occurs.
Just any of them. I just want to know for my own, is this something that we're doing as funds become available, we're actually doing some of this, or this is kind of like just a goal that we may never, because I realize that us doing this costs money, and then there's not just the outlay, but then of course the upkeep and everything else, and I know that we're not exactly flush with cash, but I'm just curious if any of this is being done.
So our principal traffic engineer, Justin Link, should be on the call there. He may be able to follow up with that in a more precise response for you. Justin, are you there?
Yes, Commissioner Rice, your assessment is correct. The majority of the sidewalk infill is actually based on conditioning through projects. Funding is at this point a little scarce for infill, but it has been done in the past as a city project. Another example would be the West LA Avenue widening.
Okay, thank you.
So that did include sidewalk infill.
Okay. All right. Didn't that also include bike lanes, or is that the one?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Bike lanes and two-way left turn lane.
Okay, excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Almost done. I only have two more questions. And it has to do with a master drainage plan, and this was because of a letter I received earlier. Could you explain that to me? I'm a little Okay, the master drainage plan, it talks about us revising the manual and we've decreased stormwater flows. But I don't fully understand that. Could you kind of maybe simply dumb it down for me possibly?
Page number you on?
Page 17, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Deputy Director of Public Works, Jill Deacons, available? Jill, are you there?
I am here, but I'm going to actually pass it off to Brent, who might know more about this. If you're talking about lowering the flood potential, I'm not involved in that.
So this is Brent Seamer. I'm the Deputy Director for Public Works, and I oversee the floodplain management. And the master plan of drainage basically is a summary of all of the infrastructure that the city has. We recently conducted in 2004 an update of evaluation of all of our infrastructure using the information that the county has provided for floodplain management, and then identified all of the infrastructure that would have deficiencies. And then once we understood those deficiencies, then we could identify a sequence of improvements that could be done for that. A couple different problems arose when we completed that plan. One, it's using overtly conservative floodplain or hydrology, rainfall, runoff, all of that from the county, which has pretty much been debunked by a lot of developers who have been doing updated mapping all along the Arroyo. The Land Sea project, the ZBEC project you recently approved has not been built at Easy Street and Chain. Moving upstream, some private development, another developer on Patricia have all contributed to showing that the infrastructure may not be compromised anywhere close to what it was before. In any case, that infrastructure evaluation, we have used it. Your recent project for the enclave that was for the Farmers Building, used that analysis to determine some insufficiency in the storm drain along the on Galena. And so that project actually participated in the future upgrade of that facility, and we're actually underway with a study to see what that undertaking will take. So right now, we do have a master plan. It is overtly conservative. A deficiency right now in it could mean that the pipe is 1 inch too small in diameter, which anyone can obviously think that's not a huge deficiency, but we just did not have the ability to tighten it up a little bit further. So it's a useful general planning tool at this point, but we're hoping to eventually develop better funding through the FEMA to get better floodplain mapping, and that'll roll into a better infrastructure plan. So that's a general what the plan's used for, but we can, we definitely have criteria in it in which all development uses to identify its own impacts. And so we generate detention basins and stormwater facility improvements on a project by project basis using that, which means development is generally being conservative in how they are protecting the rest of the city. So those are, hopefully that kind of gives you a shotgun idea of what it is.
I appreciate that, Mr. Seamer, and I believe that I had a conversation with you, or maybe it was on the up here, where we talked about petitioning the state to pull some parts of Simi Valley out of 100-year flood zones. Was that
so? The big story would be is to try to get FEMA to help fund
correct?
A project, which could be $500,000 to $1 million to do that. what we have been successful so far as development has come along, they have helped support, and we have provided some resources being topography, and they've expanded their study areas to help include a lot of the neighborhood around them as kind of an extra benefit of their development. So we've been doing that, but still there's no funding on the horizon at this point. I have a potential maybe 2023 for federal money funding, but it's obviously has to wait each year as Congress allocates funding towards mapping.
Thank you. All right, no more questions.
Any other questions?
I do.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Gray.
On page 16, when you talk about the school safety routes and school programs, I kind of like to go back to the question in regards to the bike lanes. I've been an avid biker for decades, and I noticed that when we put specifically like Alamo, anytime that there's any sort of construction that takes place, the bike lanes end up getting always broken up, and then they patch them with very terrible patchwork that it makes it very uncomfortable on a bike to actually use the bike lane. So I was just wondering what you guys are doing for those bike lanes and improving also bike lanes, actually putting more bike lanes in throughout Simi Valley.
Need to defer the question to Justin Link, Principal Engineer.
Yes, Commissioner Gray. So the city has a bicycle master plan
Mhm.
that as projects are constructed, that we would, generally speaking, overlays or any kind of road maintenance, we would implement those bike lanes where right-of-way would allow us to install them. So the width between curb to curb. We do have quite a few areas that there are gaps that would require additional right-of-way. So there's additional costs associated with that. And usually those types of improvements are done using active transportation program grant funds. Unfortunately, the city is not particularly well positioned because the grant funding and the ATP program is geared more towards areas that have areas in the city that are below certain levels as far as income is concerned. So we are not competitive at the state level with other cities because we have very few areas that actually qualify for those grant funds. We do have opportunities with another program that's called CMAQ. It's the Congestion Management and Air Quality Program, and we do apply for those funds quite frequently. However, those funding cycles, that money has basically dried up. So the long answer and the short of it is that we do try to install bike lanes where we can, and when we have the funding for them. As far as maintenance is concerned within the bike lanes, we do have a moratorium when we do overlays or we do any kind of road surface improvements, that if any utility comes in and digs up any part of the roadway, they actually have to repave or resurface a much longer stretch than just patching the holes. But unfortunately, if we've had a street that has not seen any kind of improvements as far as the pavement condition is concerned, then they are allowed to do that kind of patchwork, unfortunately. So eliminating those kinds of situations does require a more extensive either grind and overlay or a larger area of dig outs, essentially spot repairs, to eliminate those locations where either the compaction has failed or the fill was not done correctly to start with.
Okay. And then my next question is on, I believe it goes with page 18. The recycled water master plan. It does talk about that you're doing, or that we're doing, recycled water. But I was just wondering, to what extent are we doing that? Are we trying to make it such that new construction parts of the city would actually be able to use, I believe they call it, is it purple water, where you can actually use it for outdoor plants and yards versus, and I understand it's very difficult to do it for a whole city, but are we trying to do something for new construction that it's already piped in, so that we aren't using our drinking water for regular yards on new constructions?
To which will either Joe Deacon or Brent Seymour address this question.
Hi, this is Joe Deacon. Commissioner Gray, we do have a recycle water master plan that does call for a widespread expansion across the city. However, we have not implemented that. So our water mains, our purple pipe water mains, that is, the ones that carry recycled water, really only go as far as from the wastewater treatment plant where recycled water is generated easterly along West Los Angeles Avenue becomes Easy Street. And we have a main to Madera Road. That is the extent of our main. The initial project was to bring recycled water to the Simi Valley landfill, and the landfill has been serviced for nearly 20 years. But we have a couple other customers along that main that runs easterly. But at this time, because of the limited amount of transmission main, there really is limited requirement for developers to prepare for recycled water when there really is no transmission project underway to get water to them.
So is that something that we need to work with the state to be able to get that done so that developers would want to implement those? Or what is that process that gets us to that point?
Well,
Where developers
we've taken upon the cities or the waterworks districts' behalf to build the backbone infrastructure, the main that would deliver. And we have applied to the state for grants under the water bonds, the various water bonds that have been adopted over the past 12 years or more, 15 years nearly. But we have not been able to implement any of those particular expansions at this point. So yes, your thought is good, but we continue to work toward expanding our recycled water system.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the consent calendar item? Okay, hearing none, we had a motion by Vice Chair Tolson and a second by Commissioner Gray. Unless there's any objections, the consent calendar will stand approved. No objections, consent calendar is approved. Moving on. Continued business. Mr. Gibson, who's going to be presenting continued business?
Yes, good evening, Chairman Mann, members of the commission. This is the continued public hearing to amend portions of Title IX of the Municipal Code regarding regulations to allow beekeeping in the city. And our senior planner, Jennifer Santos, is here to begin the presentation and introduce the team.
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for the presentation. Can everybody see that, the presentation?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. I wanted to introduce Jerry Hiddleman, our senior consulting planner, who will provide the presentation tonight. And I also wanted to introduce Ruth Asprin. She is associated with the Los Angeles County Beekeepers Association, and she's here tonight to assist with answering any questions that the commission may have regarding the technicalities of beekeeping. Jerry, are you there?
Yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, Chair and Planning Commission members. Next slide, please, Jennifer. Okay, so I will start by providing a brief overview of what was presented at the January 20th Planning Commission hearing and then move on to new information. And even going further back, in April 2019, the City Council requested information on the zoning requirements related to beekeeping due to community concerns raised over limitations placed on backyard beekeeping in Simi Valley. At their September 14th, 2020 meeting, the City Council directed staff to explore regulations allowing backyard beekeeping activities on smaller residential lots and seek input from the neighborhood councils regarding this allowance. So then in October of 2020, staff presented draft text amendments language regarding backyard beekeeping to all 4 neighborhood councils and received input discussed in the staff report. Next slide, please. At the January 20th, 2021 hearing, the Planning Commission continued this item to allow staff to look at the following alternative regulations related to beekeeping practices. They included allowing beekeeping on perhaps lots 10,000 square feet or greater, an increase in the minimum setbacks from property lines. We looked into augmenting the public notice radius and notification time. Also explore increased setbacks for sensitive neighboring properties such as schools, parks, senior centers, and senior housing. Next slide, please. In the interim, staff researched the beekeeping ordinances for the counties of San Diego and Ventura, and the cities of Ojai, Moore Park, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, San Diego, Santa Barbara, Thousand Oaks, Laguna Beach, and San Clemente. From this research, staff has found that beekeeping standards in other jurisdictions are consistent with the draft ordinance that'll be presented to you tonight. For instance, the other jurisdictions typically require no more than 2 beehives on a certain location. Some of them require notification of surrounding properties. It's typically a 7 to 10 foot setback required from side or rear property lines. Requeening of the hives every 2 years is required. We found that a minimum 6 foot high shrub or fence barrier is required to keep bees from flying high over adjacent properties. And also maintaining a constant water source for bees is important. Next slide. Staff also researched articles and guidelines related to backyard beekeeping. And these are included in Exhibit 3 of your staff report. You might have read through these. First is the best practice guidelines from the University of California. The others include publications prepared by the Oregon State University Extension and Cornell University regarding backyard beekeeping. They all include best beekeeping practices for care of bees and reducing conflicts with neighbors. The standards in these reports are consistent with the draft ordinance that I'll present soon. This table shows a comparison of the existing Simi Valley beekeeping regulations, also options A and B that were presented to the Planning Commission at your January 20th hearing, and also option C, which is based on input received from you, the planning commissioners, and input from the neighborhood councils and staff research into best beekeeping practices. As you can see, the existing regulations allow some beekeeping activities on larger lots. However, they do not currently allow what is typically known as backyard beekeeping on smaller residential lots. As you know, options A and B were discussed at length at the January 20th meeting. And as you can see, the last one, option C, I'll review in detail on the next few slides. However, on the table, there are some significant revisions that have been made regarding option C, including the minimum lot size, which is 10,000 square feet now. Public noticing requirements have been increased, and then the distance from sensitive structures is addressed, and And those are from structures that are used for human occupancy or habitation. Now I'll dive more closely into the option C provisions. So as you can see, we are looking at a minimum lot size for beekeeping, which has been increased to 10,000 square feet or greater. This larger minimum lot size would provide more backyard space for beekeeping activities, thereby reducing the likelihood of negative interactions with neighboring properties. A 50-foot setback is proposed to be for an increased setback of a minimum distance of 50 feet from any legally existing off-site structure used for human occupancy or habitation, other than the residence of the property owner, where the bees will be kept. Staff recommends not to base setbacks to other sensitive uses such as daycare centers, schools, or senior centers, as this poses a staff burden to define, track, and monitor off-site facilities. However, proximity to these sensitive uses will be addressed through the conditional use permit process. A 20-foot setback is required from streets, public parks, and sidewalks. This is included in the proposed ordinance to further ensure the safety of off-site areas that may be occupied by the public. And similar to the other options, the draft ordinance, option C, would allow backyard beekeeping in the RMOD, RM, the RL, RVL, RE, and open space zones. And as long as the properties are at least a minimum, again, of 10,000 square feet in size. Now, option C presents a mixture of option A and B and the current guidelines in terms of required permits. Staff is recommending that all administrative actions and all administrative conditional use permits for beekeeping activities for lots between 10,000 square feet size and 3 acres of size to have an administrative hearing requiring public notification. However, for properties over 3 acres, staff is recommending to not require a permit if the properties are within the animal overlay zoning district. And if they're over 3 acres, an administrative conditional use permit would be required for properties outside of the animal overlay zoning district. It is staff's opinion that option C captures the recommendations of the Planning Commission while allowing more flexibility for lots 3 acres or greater in size. And in zoning districts that are currently allowed to have beehives on their property. The Planning Commission recommended that notification radius be increased from 100 to 300-foot radius and extend the notification period from 10 to 30 days. Staff is proposing to implement the 300-foot radius notification, but have a 10-day notification period. This is to maintain consistency with the notification time period required for all other entitlement applications. Should residents oppose the beekeeping activities for a property, the request will be deferred to the Planning Commission for review and determination. Now, staff recommends that the beekeeping regulations that were presented as part of options A and B remain as part of option C. These regulations include beekeeping best practices such as maintaining a minimum distance of 7 feet from property lines, a 6-foot fence or shrub buffer around the hives, direct beehives away from adjoining properties, requeen the beehives every 2 years, and provide a water source, a constant water source, that they use movable frame hives, and they be replaced every 2 years as well, and also require registration with the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner. Now, regarding the limit of 2 hives per permit, the studies and the manuals prepared by the University of Oregon, the University of California, and the Honey Bee Health Coalition all suggest that beekeepers start with 1 or 2 hives and then slowly grow the population. In addition, a study prepared by Cornell University suggested that 3 hives can be placed or located in residential properties that are at least 1/4 of an acre. And that's approximately 10,000 square feet. Therefore, the recommendation of 2 hives per property on a minimum of a 10,000 square foot lot is appropriate. Should beekeepers want to grow their beekeeping activities, staff recommends that the added requirement of an administrative hearing with a public notification for requests of more than 2 hives per property be in the ordinance. Next slide. A beekeeping or apiculture definition is proposed to be added in the definition section of the municipal code as follows. Beekeeping or apiculture is the maintenance of bee colonies, commonly in man-made hives. A beekeeper or apiarist keeps bees in order to collect their honey and other products that the hive produces. A location where bees are kept is called an apiary or a bee yard. Now with that, the proposed changes to the municipal code presented tonight will establish regulations to allow beekeeping activities in single family and open space zones as requested by the City Council. Therefore, it is recommended that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of Z-S-754 in accordance with option C as presented for the establishment of backyard beekeeping regulations. Thank you and be safe, and staff is available to answer any of your questions along with our expert beekeeper. Thank you.
Do we have any questions of staff from planning commissioners?
None from me.
You guys are all very, very quiet.
I have a question.
Commissioner Hodge, by all means.
Could someone from staff point out to me the specific ordinance that allows people to currently have beekeeping in 8,000 square foot lots?
I can add to that if you'd like, or answer that.
Is that you, Ms. Santos?
Yes.
Okay.
So
please.
in our existing ordinance, if there's a lot that's located within the animal keeping overlay zone and it's 8,000 square feet or less, then they can have beekeeping because they are in the animal keeping zone, just like any other farm animal that they would like to have on the property. They would just be subject to the required setbacks and the 50-foot distance from any off-site habitable structure.
Well, the reason I ask is the only place I could find anything with respect to bees was in our ordinance 9-44.060, and that was sub D1. And the only thing that it says is that beekeeping currently is that beehives shall be permitted in RVL, RE, and OS zones as follows. Then it talked, and then I'm not even sure it says as follows when I looked it up, but where do you see the 8,000 square foot in the current ordinance?
Well, that's not specific. We don't have a standard in place for a specific lot size other than the fact if it's 3 acres or more. It talks about those zones, but if you reference into our animal keeping zone, it talks about that bees are considered a farm animal, and farm animals are allowed to be maintained in animal keeping overlay zones. So if there happens to be a lot within that area, it's staff's interpretation that because their bees are considered a farm animal, they can maintain bees.
Okay, what's the minimum size of a lot currently in an RVL zone?
The minimum lot size for RVL is 20,000 square feet, but there might be lots less than that because there's areas within the city that are older, but they still maintain an animal overlay.
Well, just all right. So RVL is 20,000 square feet or more, correct?
Correct.
And then RE, what's the minimum size there?
RE is over 1 acre, I believe.
Plus 1 acre. And open space zones, I guess, open space just means there's nothing on it, or no more than one unit per 40 acres, correct?
Correct.
Okay. See, the reason I'm questioning this is I was very surprised because when we had our last meeting in January, there was no reference in the entire staff report about existing regulations being interpreted as allowing lots of 8,000 to 20,000 square feet. So bees are farm animals. Farm animals can be in overlay zones. Those farm animals can be in 20,000 square foot or more. But we also have an inclusion that says that beekeeping shall be permitted, and then it limits the size to a minimum of 20,000 square feet. So if you are in an overlay zone that isn't RVL, RE, or OS, you can't have bees. That's the way I read this. And it surprised me when I saw the current zoning standards saying that we allow it in 8,000 square feet. I don't think we do. Now, maybe that's just my interpretation, and I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. And I think that we had the discussion last week, or last time rather, about concerns over 8,000 square foot lots and sort of expanding. Well, there's an indication here of expanding to 10,000 square feet. My recollection, and I went back and listened to the meeting from the last time out, and I take a look at the minutes that are in here. Commissioner Tolson made a comment about 10,000 square feet, sort of as well, maybe we could do that. I don't remember Commissioner Rice saying anything about 10,000 square feet. I do recall him agreeing with my concerns about expanding too quickly and going beyond what at the time we thought was the current maximum of 20,000 square feet. I didn't have any problem with going from animal overlay to non-animal overlay, because if it works for animal overlay, it should work for non-animal. In fact, it probably would work better because animals could be impacted. They might be a bee sensitive property. So I thought that all the conversation that we had was 20,000 square feet, because that was essentially what we were told last time the current zoning requirement was. It perplexes me how we've come up with our current rules of saying 8,000 square feet based upon this very specific limitation identified in the ordinance that I just talked about. And I really don't remember anything about us saying, yeah, sure, 10,000 square feet sounds good. I do recall that was something that was mentioned, but not discussed, or in my recollection of the meeting, and then also listening to the recording of the meeting, something that was a consensus. My recollection was, as we thought about expanding the 20,000 that you can have in animal overlay to anywhere 20,000 square feet, and then to have these additional limitations. I do believe also that we were quite concerned about this 10-day, or at least I was, and I think the consensus became that the 10 days should be 30-day. So let me ask you about why you want to go back. The staff is recommending 10 days again. Can you give me an example of one of the entitlement notices that we currently have that only require 10 days?
So, good evening, Commissioner Hodge. This is Deputy Director Gibson here. So to answer two questions, the recommendation of 10,000 square feet is just that, a recommendation. If the Planning Commission so desires to reach a consensus on a minimum square footage, that is part of your recommendation you can make tonight. If whether it's 10, 15, 20, that could slip right into your recommendation without causing too much revision to the staff report beyond just the number. Regarding the 10-day public hearing notice, this is the standard public hearing notice timeframe for all public hearings presented to the Planning Commission and for administrative hearings. So whether it's a 300,000 square foot industrial complex or a conditional use permit for a service station or for a administrative conditional use permit for a person who wants to keep 20 cats at their house as a public hearing. It's a 10-day notice. And we're recommending that the standard be maintained for all types of public hearings because it just fits much more easily into the municipal code. And we're, as a city, we're also trying to be business and customer friendly to not delay projects with excess hearing dates. And that 10-day hearing notice is somewhat consistent with state law as far as minimum public hearing notice requirements.
All right. Well, see, here's my anxiety with that. I think this is a safety issue. I think it's a public safety issue because people have allergies and they can die from a bee sting. And I realize that, that may sound hyperbolic. I don't think that it is. And my anxiety is, as I recall, the 10-day notice is 10 days from mailing. And, it used to be pretty good. You might get mail in 2 days and somebody might have 8 days to look at their mail and to raise their hands. You've got weekends, which limit that number of days. We don't have anything in here about extending days for if the 10th day falls in a weekend or there's a holiday. And also this being a public safety concern, I don't have any problem with adding a little more time to that. Fine, 10 days is the state minimum, but and we allow this for if somebody wants to have 20 cats or change something in a standard conditional use permit that in an administrative environment. I'll tell you, I have my very strong reservations about using a 10-day standard when you add on the mailing. You don't allow any time for weekends when somebody wouldn't have the opportunity to contact the city anyway, or anything for holidays. It just seems like a really tight time frame. And if we want to be friendly to people, I agree. I think that we want to be as we don't want to be obstreperous. We don't want to, be stopping success stories. But one of those success stories is the quality of life for the people who live here, the residents of our city. And I think that's an issue that people should have a little more time to think about and, to have. So I do like, some of the other things that are in here. I think, and I congratulate staff, in the, preparation of a lot of this. I'm very concerned about the 10,000 square feet and also about the 10-day thing. So the only questions I have at this point.
Do we have any other questions of any other commissioners? Okay, please.
I do have one question to staff. Didn't we pass an ordinance that people could have chickens on a certain size property? What size was that property?
Yes, and Ms. Santos, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's the 8,000 square foot
8,000.
minimum
You
lot
could have
size.
4 chickens, is that correct?
Right.
6
6?
Correct.
as
Oh my
part of a
gosh.
hen keeping project.
Oh, if it's a project?
It's a special ordinance that they prepared for like 4-H type
4-H
hen-keeping
or
projects
FFA or,
on non-overlay zoned properties that already allow chickens, but this would be on regular properties
Regular.
if they have the 8,000 square foot minimum lot size.
okay, thank you. And just for clarification, I know Commissioner Tolson did use the term 10,000. I believe I mentioned 10,000 square feet as well. And as I understand it, that 10,000 square feet equates to roughly a quarter of an acre, which I believe was in some of the guidelines here about the size for beekeeping in other cities, which is kind of how I came up with that number. I just didn't enunciate it very well last time. You know, one other thing we didn't bring up last time is how far away these bee boxes would be from a swimming pool if the neighbor had a swimming pool that was already existing, because obviously you can't. And I know bees are attracted to water, and if we have a beekeeper whose water gets low, that might be a problem in that instance too. But I think, isn't one of the people up there a bee expert? Good.
Yes, Ms. Santos, if you want to respond to that and or introduce our guest.
Yes, thank you. I'd be happy to have, if Ruth is available, Ms. Askren, if you're available to answer that question.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Yeah, bees that are placed on their site with water on the same day that they arrive will not bother the next door neighbor's swimming pool. But they, you know, beekeeping is a kind of animal husbandry, just like chicken keeping or horses or anything else. And there are certain things that have to be attended to. And one of them is in Southern California and in hot places like Simi Valley, to let the bees run out of their water would really be neglectful. So it's very important that they have a constant water supply near the hives.
If I could ask another couple questions, Ms. Is it Askin?
Askren with an
Askren,
R, yeah.
I apologize. Doesn't beekeeping, what kind of a time commitment does that require?
For 1 or 2 hives, you're talking about, you know, in the beginning of the learning curve, maybe an hour every 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
That would be a lot, but no, it's not that labor intensive.
Okay.
Processing the honey, when you take the honey out of the hive and doing the extraction and cleaning that mess up, that's, as you know, honey is very sticky. But yeah, the keeping of the bees themselves is not hugely labor intensive.
Okay. And my other question is, what about wind? Because I know that, you know, bees can be blown, they're very light, of course. And, you know, with the big winds that we get, couldn't they be kind of scattered?
Yeah, they just won't fly.
Yeah.
If it's really windy, they go out to the edge where their little door is and they look out and they're going, because yeah, they'll get blown, you know, to bits. Really, they're just really small little creatures. They know that if there are, you know, miles an hour winds out there, they just don't leave the hive. Just like in the rain, they also don't leave. If it's very cold, under 60 degrees or 55, they won't venture out.
Okay, I have one other question for you, and that is the difference between these domesticated honeybees and, say, the bees that seem to be a problem. We get, for example, bees took over a building behind where one of my friends lives and, you know, started, you know, taking over their swimming pool, and, you know, and we hear about all the Africanized honey, you know, bees and that sort of stuff. And I've even had a bee ball in my backyard at one point that was there for a couple of days before it left. And I know that neighbors, of mine, that's their biggest concern, or those sort of things.
Okay, well, you're mixing a few things all together here in a sort of kind of a typical bee mix of anxiety about the stinging, and also the fact that they can infest places here in Southern California. Yes, we have aggressive feral bees who can be a problem, but they're here anyway. And having domesticated honeybees as an animal husbandry project for a backyard hobbyist really doesn't affect the Africanized bees. In fact, it helps to hybridize them more, which they have become gentler and gentler since they first invaded in about 1992, because of being hybridized with commercial honeybees, which is what people like me keep, who want to have fun beekeeping and not be in fear of your life. So yes, beekeepers are required to oversee their queens and make sure, that's what that rule is about, replacing your queen every 2 years. Most beekeepers replace their queen every year, or whenever they need a new queen, if they see that there's a chance that their hive could be taken over by Africanized bees, then you must buy a queen and replace her. And so beekeepers, backyard beekeepers, any kind of beekeeper, they're really doing a favor for the bee environment around us in making it less hostile and in sort of keeping watch. Now, one of the things that you mentioned was a ball of bees. That's a
Yes.
swarm. Yeah, so that's the way a beehive reproduces itself, by splitting into about half. They make a new queen, and a bunch of bees, 20,000 is about a half of a beehive. They'll leave because the hollow tree trunk where they are, or the abandoned compost bin, or wherever they've infested has become too small. They're too successful. So they split, and half of them go find some other place to live. So beekeepers never want that to happen with their beehives. With a managed hive, if you let your managed hive swarm, there goes your honey crop. All your workers are gone, and they take it all with them, because in order to swarm, they all have to fill up their bellies with honey before they leave, so they have energy until they can find a place to live, get established. That all takes a lot of calories. So no, we don't want swarming. That's a very bad thing for beekeepers, and it's one of the main reasons that you inspect your hive every 10 days to 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
I have a couple of questions.
By all means, go ahead, Commissioner Gray.
So I noticed that on our municipal codes that it says there's bees are only listed twice. One of them has to do with if you are in the RVL or the RE or the SO, that it says 3 acres or more without an overlay zone designation. However, there wasn't anything for the AL or H, which is the animal zoning, which I understand there's not as many sites in Simi Valley that have that. I mean, I live up in Big Sky, so we do have our estate lots are designated for those. So some of my questions have to do with the way that C is worded, that it says that no property or no permit for properties in animal overlay zones of 3 acres or more. But what if they have more than 2 hives? Because it states that if it has more than 2 hives, that they do need to get a permit.
That's correct. More than 2 hives would be a hearing and an actual administrative conditional use permit.
No matter the size of the lot.
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to get clarification because it kind of indicated that, great. One of the concerns that I brought up a couple of weeks ago when we first heard about this was the requeening hive, that there is nothing that states that they have to do. I mean, it states that they have to, but there's nothing of regulations or oversight enforcement that would require anybody to have any sort of permitting or any documentation that states that they had requeened at least every 2 years. Is there a way that we can make it so that their hearings or their CPUs require that they need to be renewed every 2 years, ensuring that they've provided the requeening documentation, so that we don't have somebody that considering we are talking about health and safety of communities, somebody that has 20 cats is different than somebody that has a bee hive or 2 or 3 that has not been requeened. And as you guys are saying, that if it doesn't requeen, that is potential for the Africanized honeybees. I did also notice that there's ways to make sure, I'm very pleased that you guys did provide those documents, by the way, thank you, on how not to have aggressive bees. But it is very concerning about the requeening. And when we met the last time, there was nothing that had enforcement for requeening documentation.
Yeah, I'll let city staff jump in if they need to, but having a renewal every 2 years is, depending on the number of permits in the city, could be very hard to track. Even other permits that need renewals are, very, very difficult to track. I think the best way is through seeing if there's a problem, because there'll definitely be a problem if there is no requeening done. And I think that's how other cities do it. Maybe Ms. Askren can jump in on this as well.
Thank you. The city of Santa Monica has that provision. They require a queen every year, actually, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, they require a new marked queen once a year, but there's no enforcement. There's no way to enforce it. But here's the thing. Most beekeepers who are not, how can I put this politely, who are not sort of crackpots, most beekeepers who want to have fun, don't want to endanger their neighbors, and don't want to get hurt themselves, are firmly committed to keeping their hives docile. And those that are not, those that are, keeping feral bees and who would like to only have these wild bees in their yard that are really hard to inspect and really annoying and will bother them more than anybody else. But I've met people like that. Some of these beekeepers, they just want to keep nature wild, and they also want to have it in their backyard. It's kind of goofy. But the thing is, those people aren't going to comply with this anyway. They're already, people who want to register their hives are good, law-abiding citizens who also happen to want to be able to do some beekeeping agriculture in their backyard. And
No, I probably would have to agree with you on that. I mean, anybody that's got animals usually cares about those animals, but the argument, I'm having a difficult time with the argument of it's just too much work for the city to do this when the city sends out notifications for business renewals and follows up on all of those on a regular basis. That things are so automated at this point that I don't see how we couldn't make this more automated, that a notice is sent out on a regular basis saying that your requeening needs to be, documentation needs to be submitted in order for you to keep your permit.
what kind of documentation are you considering?
Like a documentation that says that you've requeened. I mean, it's like there should be.
Like
we asked this question before, and I really didn't get a good answer on, when you get a queen, you purchase a queen, don't you?
Yes, you do, but now.
Wouldn't that be an invoice or something that shows that you've gotten a new queen?
Sure, you could get an invoice from the place where, of course you have an invoice. Something like that is pretty easy to mock up. In other counties where they have a staff that they've hired for beekeeping consultation, for actual inspections, because they have really bad diseases. We have Africanized bees, but they have nosema, which is contagious, and it will kill all the bees in the area if it's not taken care of by the beekeepers. So they actually have a person for the county who goes around and does sort of targeted inspections and looks to see if you have a new queen in there, what is the nature of your hive temperament. Inspector Reyes, who works for the Department of Agriculture for the County of Los Angeles, will show up sort of at random at people's bee yards and say, hi, I just want to see what's going on. He'll walk through the bee yard without protective gear, which means he's probably gotten stung a few times before, because you can walk through a bee yard without protective gear on if you've got gentle honeybees. So but that's staff. It's a staffing issue, in my opinion. You could produce documentation, but there's no certification that you have a pedigreed honeybee queen, that you've not only purchased it, but you've also taken the time to go into the hive and get rid of the bad queen, put the new one in, wait the 10 days, take the tape off, let her out, and then go back again in 10 more days and make sure that she survived.
So Commissioner Gray, a requirement can be added to either as a condition of an approval for a conditional use permit or straight into the code where must provide documentation to the city on a biannual basis or an annual basis. That could be added to an ordinance.
Okay, and then my other question had to do with the fencing, because I brought this up before, is that, you know, it says fencing or bush or shrubbery. And I asked, is there any sort of description for that? Because, I mean, could this just be a chain link fence that's 6 feet? Does it have to be a solid fence? Shrubbery, is there a density that, again, maybe the bee people experts can answer that question, but it seems as though if it's supposed to be denser than like a chain link fence, then maybe we need to put some description in there. Same with the shrubbery. You know, there's things that are dense, like a boxwood versus
Cactus.
my neighbor's got something that's very whimsical, or I've got silver sheens that are very lacy. It's not there to block anybody's view. It's just there to lace and do like a shear. So just wondering what type of shrubbery or fencing is considered appropriate for bees.
Well, if you have a 10,000 square foot property, there's no reason your bees need to be anywhere near the fence, in my opinion. In LA City, it's 5,000 square feet for 2 hives, 1 hive for 2,500 square feet. And that's the setup that I'm most familiar with. But if for some reason on a big property like that, somebody needed to put their bees somewhere near the fence, you would want, yes, the openings, the like 2 by 2 inch openings of a chain link fence, the bees would go through that. You want like, you know, Dudinea or some kind of low eucalyptus shrubbery or ficus or, you know, any number of different kinds of fence type of shrubs, you know, natives, a screen of bottle brush or anything like that.
Commissioner Gray, if needed, we can add language for a solid fence or maybe some descriptive terms for the shrubbery as well to make sure it's more solid and not just sparse.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely something I'm concerned about, because it's kind of like, you know, like I said, chain link fence would be almost not a fence. And same thing with some of the shrubbery. So I think it would be, if it's requiring to have some sort of a fence to promote upward, you know, because it still needs to be 50 feet from another dwelling. And so, I mean, I've had bees, it took us 3 months to get rid of bees that decided that our fireplace was a lovely place to stay. And we didn't want to kill them. And so it was a very long process and drove my cats crazy with having the fireplace with bees in them. But you know, it's one of those things, you don't want anything to be a nuisance of your neighbors, and a fence without a description of what type of fence or shrubbery would be almost like, why have it if it can be anything that looks like a shrub or a fence? So I think it would be better for us, if we're going to have that wording in there, to have a density of a shrub and what type of a fence. Again, should it be a plastic plank, wood fence, that type of thing?
Good point. We can certainly add that.
Great, thanks. I think those are my only questions.
May I also add, Commissioner Gray, we can also, as part of the application review process, require some type of submittal of proof of the fencing or shrubbery that is going to be proposed, either through pictures or through inspection.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a real quick question for Ms. Askren. One of the, and I'm just curious about the nuts and bolts of this. One of the requirements is that as I recall, in terms of best practices, is that the hives not become overdense or large, or I can't remember exactly what the language is, but you want to make sure that it's not too populated, I guess, that would cause them to go swarming. And you talked about that a little bit earlier. How do you do that? How do you prevent them from, I mean, being successful and hyperpopulating their 2 boxes?
Well, you have a few different options of doing that. This is one of the reasons that beekeepers like other beekeepers, because if you have too many bees and you have a friend who lost a hive, you can help them start a new one by bringing them a few frames of bees from your overabundant hive. That's called a split. Or you can just take stuff out and put it in the freezer for the next dearth time. If they're getting too big, if you have a queen who's laying lots and lots of eggs, this happens in the spring. This is what we want. So what we do is we add a box, add another box, add another box. A colony expands in the spring and shrinks in the fall and winter. So my hives get to be about 5 or 6 boxes, where the top 2 boxes in the spring are honey. So yeah, you want them to get big, but you don't want them to swarm. So here's the problem. Beekeepers who are neglectful don't pay attention to their hives and see that they're really getting successful and building up, and they don't add enough boxes. So if you don't add space, beekeeping is a lot about space management. In times of the year where there's nothing to eat out there for the bees, you got to take space away from them because they have to patrol and protect all that space. But in the spring, if there are too many bees for the amount of space they have, the pheromone of the queen can't get through to all of them. It's too densely packed. Then they go, well, maybe we don't have a queen. We better build another one and swarm. And so
Okay.
yeah, there are problems of abundance and problems of dearth. And, we get both of them in beekeeping.
My final question is from Ms. Santos. I do recall at our last meeting, there was a discussion about the number of properties within the city that have hives and the number of hives. And as I recall, and help me out with this, I recall that there's only like 7 properties with hives. Did I misrecall that?
That we're aware of, yes.
Okay. And of those 7, what's the smallest property?
I'm not sure, unfortunately.
Do you have any reason to expect that it's less than 20,000 square feet?
It could be, but based on the information provided by code enforcement last time in the report, there's been very few complaints. So I know there's a few that are kind of have been unresponsive, but if complaints were brought up to attention, they were addressed.
Okay, so there are 7 lots that we know of in the city. We don't know how big or small they are at this point, correct?
Right, correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I have a couple more questions and actually a comment too, because I do have notes from that it's 7 beekeepers with 759 hives. My question goes back to Ruth Askren. Am I saying your last name properly?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Of all the, and again, I didn't quite catch what your, it sounds like you're a bee expert. So I apologize if I don't have the proper terms, but in your experience, what percentage of beekeepers are neglectful?
Okay, interesting question. First of all, let me give you my qualifications. I started doing live bee removal in 2012 on a lark, and ended up keeping bees for various people who wanted the bees out of their chimney, but they still wanted to have them in their backyard. So I would relocate these hives, requeen them with docile genetics, and pretty soon I had clients all over the place. So now I have a business called The Hive Tribe, thehivetribe.com, beekeeping at your place. I take care of bees for other people on their small ranches, estates, and even some backyards. Yeah. A lot of people see beekeeping as a noble thing to do, like saving a whale. And I don't really agree. Bees are not endangered. Honeybees are not an endangered species, but they are wonderful beneficial insect that gives us something that's so unique and great to make yourself if you can, that a lot of people are very interested in it for that too, not to mention the pollination, which allows us to have more and better fruit and vegetables. Having said that, yeah, there are still some people who try to get off easy with beekeeping and just, like I said, the bee havers. I want to say not outside of the realm of normal human error, which is somewhere between like 2 and 5%, I would say. The problem is those people tend not to last very long because it becomes unmanageable for them. And then they ask somebody like me to bail them out. So that's where the club comes in very handy. And if you guys had a club in Ventura or even a Simi Valley beekeeping club, it would go a long ways to keep your beekeepers responsible and responsive to each other and to the government agency.
Great. Yeah, because I mean, I love bees. I do very little pest control, if any at all, and I have my vegetable garden, which I love. So I want the bees. I just don't necessarily want a hive.
Of course, not everybody does. Yeah. Any other questions from you guys?
Any other questions or any other comments? Okay. I'm going to actually have to go back here because I completely obliterated my little speech about going on to this agenda item. So I'm going to go back a little bit and then we'll go forward. Okay, we're going back. This is the time and place for public hearing on consideration of ZS 754 to amend portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code for establishing regulations for allowing beekeeping, apiculture, activities in single-family and open space zones, and for the determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Now, are there any ex parte communications to report? That's the part I wanted to get to. Just making sure, no ex parte communications. Now that we say, may we have an oral report from staff, we've already done that. So now I have gone back in time. Now we're legitimate. So back to any other commissioners have any other questions for anybody? Hearing none, I only have two quick ones. It talks about the word hive, but it doesn't define it. Is there a normal size limitation to the word hive? Are they 4x4 boxes, 2x4 boxes? We all see the white boxes. I refer to those as a hive, but is there a limit for either the size of the hive or the number of bees that would be allowed in the hive?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, the hives shrink and grow through the course of the seasons. And typically, like I'm only 5 feet tall, so I don't let any of my hives get taller than about 4 feet high, or I can't take the boxes off in order to maintain them. But generally, you don't want more than about 60,000 bees, and that's about 6 boxes, about 10,000 bees per box. And you might get some slightly different answers for that question as far as like what is a recommended maximum size. But I think that's probably a fairly accurate number. About 60,000 bees would be good maximum.
So, Ms. Santos, did we come across a definition anywhere?
I think there is one, not directly, but I concur with what she says, between 20,000 to 60,000 per hive.
So when we say somebody's allowed 2 hives, is that 2 boxes that I would refer to the boxes that, 2.5 by 2.5, whatever the size of the boxes are? Are we talking if a hive is 60 to 60,000 bees and that requires 6 boxes, are we saying that 2 hives are 12 boxes?
If I may answer.
By all means, please.
The definition of a hive is the queen and her colony.
Okay.
However big it is. but there's only one queen for that stack of boxes, whether it's two boxes or 6 boxes. The standard beehive box is 16 by 21 inches, and they come in 2 different depths, either 6.5 inches deep or 9 inches deep. But as I mentioned, most beekeepers don't want their hives to get taller than about 4 feet, maybe plus a little bit more, because you have to be able to maneuver those boxes and they can weigh a lot. So the definition of a hive is however many boxes it is, because it depends on the season of the year, and a laying queen and her attendants, worker bees, foragers, and drones.
So I guess the question really goes back now to staff. When we say we're limiting it to 2 hives per permit, in theory, they could have, 8, 10, 12 boxes, or when somebody came up with this, are we thinking that a hive is 1 box, or what are we talking here?
Can I interject something here? I'm sorry.
Please.
I hope I'm not being out of place, but whether a hive is 2 boxes or 6 boxes doesn't change the behavior
Right.
of that colony. And I think that's really what's at the bottom of all of the discussion here, is that people are afraid of aggressive bees. And if you have good genetics, then it doesn't matter if you have a big booming hive or a small puny weak one. Yes, a hive can have tens of thousands of bees in it, and that means it's really healthy, and it doesn't last that long when it has that many thousands of bees in it. As the end of spring and the hot weather comes in, they get smaller and smaller. But in order for a beekeeper to have a healthy hive, they need to have thousands and thousands of bees in the spring. Yeah.
Perhaps I can help by putting it in a planning term, where we want them to requeen the hive. So a hive would be what 1 queen can support in a healthy manner. So maybe we can go into a little more detail and say that you can have 2 queens, and that would be the 2 hives, and they should be, at a healthy number based on that. Does that work, Ms. Askren?
Yes, that's very accurate. Mm-hmm.
Now, again, a layman here. I'm assuming that queens and hives in close proximity don't create a problem within themselves. So if you have 2 queens and 6 boxes, so you have, roughly 100,000 bees, they get along fine?
No, so each box, when we refer to a box, you're talking about 10,000 bees.
Right.
Most of the year, you've got 2 or 3 boxes on the hive. So yeah, each queen has her own colony. They live separately from each other, but they're all docile vegetarians, and they don't compete in any way. There's never a problem between hives.
Okay.
Except, well, actually, in the fall, when the weather is very, very hot, bees will rob each other's hives. But this kind of frenetic activity is confined to the bee yard. And this is a reason that you want to have clearance from your fence.
Okay. That
Mhm.
answers that question. Any other commissioners have any other questions?
Well, I just wanted to point out in the glossary on that, which one was this? On one of the residential beekeeping best practice guide for nuisance free. It does define a hive as being the containers or collection of boxes housing honeybees, but under a colony, it says a group of honeybees typically consisting of a single queen, thousands of worker bees, drones, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe we should be referring to this as colonies versus hives.
I just call the boxes boxes or
Okay.
equipment.
Okay,
It's kind of, yeah, it's interchangeable.
I have a question of staff.
please.
So the staff report refers to research that was done on various cities that it seems to expand on what we had before, which was just some review of the cities in Ventura County, plus Santa Monica and Los Angeles. And then there was a list of cities in Orange County, but there was no description or discussion in the staff report about what the Orange County cities required for minimum size of the properties. And as I recall, I had done some of that research. I think one city was a minimum 15,000 square feet. Thousand Oaks, as I recall, doesn't allow it except in open space areas, et cetera. I see all this discussion in here about review of the city's ordinances and a representation that certain elements were borrowed from those various ordinances to make our current the proposed C, I suppose, option C. But what I didn't see is any kind of analysis of the number of cities that don't allow beekeeping in residential areas, the number of cities that allow beekeeping in residential areas of certain sizes, such as, does it have to be an acre or more? Does it have to be in certain areas outside of bee sensitive areas, those kinds of things, which we actually discussed at length last time. So what I'm hoping is that where I believe that staff did the analysis, but I'm curious to see what the results of that analysis was. What are the percentages? What percentages allowed in residential zones? What's the percentage that requires it to be of a certain size? How many cities allow 8,000 square feet or less, or more rather, as a requirement, such as we learned last time with this, as the city of Ojai does. And Ms. Askren to saying today that the city of Los Angeles allows it for 5,000 square feet. Well, that's a bit of a surprise to me. And I understand that, as I recall, Santa Monica has no requirement about the size, but there's all sorts of considerations that they look at. So what I'm asking is, okay, we did this analysis, but so what did we find?
Yeah, I can jump in and say what I found through my analysis is like you were just describing, a wide range of allowances. When I spoke to the beekeeping or animal control person in Laguna Beach, there is actually no size. It's up to that person to make a judgment call. And they have it even on some of their downtown lots that go down to 2,500 square feet. They allow beehives. So that was Laguna Beach. And then, other places that you just mentioned might have an 8,000 or 15,000 square foot minimum.
How many of those did you find?
Not as many as the ones that don't have any requirements, such as Santa Monica, Laguna Beach, San Clemente probably was 8,000 if I remember correctly. So there's quite a range, and I think actually Los Angeles goes down to 2,500 square feet as an allowance. Is that correct, Ms. Esker?
Yes, it's one hive per 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
And most average size lots in the city are about 5,000. So most homes can.
And then there are many cities, such as I recall, Oxnard only allows it for agriculture zones. You're not allowed to have it in any residential areas. I was just curious, since this analysis was done, I was hoping to see some objective sort of analysis of those that do as well as those that don't. All right, that's I don't have any further questions.
If I may, the city of Malibu also has no designated requirement, but they, as far as square feet on the lot size, but the hives have to be 50 feet from a road or public throughway. Those are the only requirements in Malibu. So just thought I'd throw that in.
Okay, last call for any questions. Do we have any public testimony or questions? Actually, let's, I'm sorry, I have to open the public testimony portion of the hearing first. Okay. We'll open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Did we receive any requests from members of the public to make a public statement on Zoom on this item?
I'll refer to Ms. Luxemberger. Did we receive any Zoom requests?
No, we did not.
Thank you, Ms. Luxemberger. Are there any comments from staff regarding statements made during public hearing? That's easy, that's a no.
I think we responded to that.
There are no further questions? Okay, if there's no further questions, I'm going to close the public testimony portion of this hearing. Do we have any comments or questions from members of the Planning Commission at this point? Now's the time to speak your piece. It's only you and I at the dais, so I can only see you, so you're welcome.
They're not speaking up. So I appreciate the work that staff has done, and I truly appreciate having a beekeeper come in and speak. That's very, very helpful. I personally, I like what staff has done with option C, and I believe that based upon what I read in the, is it the Cornell one where it talked about 1/4 of an acre? I don't know, I might have got that mixed up, but that I think 10,000 square feet is a realistic amount. I think that if the hives are kept, that the bees will be docile. So I'm in favor of option C with a couple caveats, and that would be that the owner of the hive would have to provide documentation of queening every 2 years, 2 years. And that, as Commissioner Gray said, that there'd be solid fencing or shrubbery as part of a condition. And then also too, if we can't make a decision about increasing the public notice from 10 days to a larger amount, that we pass along to City Council and kind of punt that one to them, and say that we would like it to be longer, but we don't want to have some, one-off, 13-day notice or something when everything else is 10 or 30. So that would be my recommendation, is that on that particular issue that we just voice our concerns to the City Council. But other than that, I'm in favor of option C.
Other
I'll go
commissioners?
next. I truly appreciate the staff effort and appreciate our guest speaker, beekeeper tonight. Thank you very, very much. I like Commissioner Gray's thoughts on the solid fencing or shrubbery as a condition to change to option C. Commissioner Rice mentioned 10,000 last time. I kind of thought that's a good one. I think that's a number to stick with. If you want to go bigger, fine, but 10,000, I think it's good. Requiring the requeening, I think every 2 years is fine. I think that's what's standard procedure. And if we need to do documentation, great. If not, that's okay too. As far as the notification, I'm okay with 10 days. It's the standard with everything else. There's no problem with every other 10 days notification as it relates to a weekend or what have you. However, if it means let's get this thing moving forward, having the City Council come up with that decision or determination, I'm okay with that. So I'm in favor of option C with those slight changes, solid fencing, requeening, which I think has already been in there, and the 10 days notification. If we want to punt that off to the City Council, that's fine for me. That's my thoughts.
Other commissioners?
Yeah, I think By the way, I said this last time and I meant it. I like bees. Bees have never given me a lick of trouble. I go for a walk almost probably most of the days of the week by this one area, especially on the weekends, during the daytime, where there's a bunch of bees in this one flower sort of patch that there, and they've never given me a lick of trouble. And I don't expect that they will or would. But that's not, I don't think, that's just my one-off, and I don't know that that's the proper way to do planning. I've spoken with a number of people since we first had this, probably in the neighborhood of 15 or 18, and all of them were shocked, like, oh my God, now they don't know, what Ms. Askren has shared with us, the information that Mr. Hittleman has shared with us, and the information that's in the staff report, identifying other places and other cities. But at the same time, there's some things I don't think that we've thought of. For example, it's fine that, we expanded to 300 feet and you give notice, but what happens when somebody else moves in? The people move away and then somebody else moves in and maybe they've got a problem. What do we do, under that circumstance? So that, you're going to move into next door to a neighborhood, you've got a problem where, maybe there's somebody with a bee allergy, and guess what? How do they find out? Is there some way that they can know? Do we have some sort of database that people can come in and check it out? Is there something that we can do to, avoid problems in our future? I really think the notification thing, especially since this is a public safety issue, just because you have 10 days for something else doesn't mean that you should have 10 days for this. I think that we should be a little more responsive to the individual needs of our residents and say, hey, public safety issue, so we give them a few more days. It's not like somebody's hive isn't going to survive, or we're preventing a business from getting a loan and going forward and starting a project. This is somebody keeping bees. We don't even know if there's anybody in the entire city that has a beehive in the sizes that we're talking about here, 10,000 square feet or more. I'm glad it's 10,000 out of 8,000. I don't read the municipal code in any way, shape, or form as providing the current standard of saying that the current standard is 8,000 square feet, because it's in an animal overlay, and animal overlays, they're animals, and therefore it's 8,000 square feet. When you have something which has specific identifiable guidelines that say you can have it in these zones, then you can only have it in those zones. So I think that the current zoning requirement rather is 20,000 square feet. It's only for animal overlays, and I'm prepared to have it go beyond animal overlays to anywhere. If it's good in the animal overlay at 20,000 square feet, it should be good, okay, anywhere at 20,000 square feet. We're making these assumptions because some cities allow it in smaller areas. The majority of the cities don't. And I've looked at, I think we talked about it last time, the number of cities in the county of Los Angeles that simply don't allow it in residential zones, or allow it very sparingly, such as an open space. It doesn't mean, maybe they're not as enlightened, but it also means that, just because some other cities allow it, that it may not necessarily be a good thing. I said this last time, just because there are only a few complaints, if I go in the backyard and a bee stings me, am I going to think, I bet somebody's got a beehive within 300 feet of here? Of course not. I mean, how am I going to know? So why would I complain? I'm going to think that Mother Nature got me. So I don't know that provides any evidence whatsoever that there aren't problems associated with it. I really have a problem with the conclusion on page 6. This has to do with the setbacks of 50 feet, et cetera. Staff recommends not to base setbacks or other sensitive uses, daycare centers, schools, senior centers, et cetera. There are a lot of cities that reference these as bee sensitive areas. So I think that instead of saying that we don't limit the setback, that's not the question. The question is, if you've got if somebody wants to have a bee hive, and they're adjacent to an elementary school, I think that should be a CUP, not an administrative CUP. Maybe they bring it to the planning commission, but it should be more than just, oh, you're entitled to have it so long as you agree to do these following things. if you're next to a bee sensitive place, a senior center that has a garden or something like that, if you're within a certain number of feet of a bee sensitive zone, a lot of cities have this, then there's more scrutiny in terms of allowing people to have it. We're just saying, well, we're not going to limit the setback. That's not the issue. The issue is should they, because they're within a certain number of feet of a bee sensitive zone or area, that we're not going to, we should look at them harder. We should make sure that they're that particular property and that particular use has been scrutinized with a conditional use permit or something similar. So I think that we're punting on that issue, and I don't like that. It's not a setback issue; it's a use issue. So I like the idea what she said. I think last time we were talking about you could actually put bees in your front yard. That shocked me. And I don't think that we should allow that. Hopefully it's written in such a way that we wouldn't be allowing that. I don't think that we should make the recommendation to the city council regarding the size of it until we get some better analysis, as opposed to just some affirmance that we looked at these other cities and their ordinances and that ours sort of stands to that when there's no analysis whatsoever as to lot size, et cetera. So those are my concerns.
Okay, Commissioner Gray. You're muted, Commissioner Gray. You're welcome.
Thanks. I forgot I muted myself. So you've heard my comments about the fencing and the shrubbery, so we can define what type of fencing and the density of shrubbery. I do like the requeening portion to have for it to be renewed. I am concerned if people can make up their own documentation, if there isn't any sort of a certification process. However, I find that if there's at least documentation and that states that they have to send in their paperwork to be able to get re-permitted, they tend to do that. There's going to be people that are going to say, I can make it up. It's not that big of a deal. I find that hopefully that's less people. The people that want to be beekeepers hopefully won't be doing that. And then hopefully down, the years that they'll actually have some sort of a certification process that makes it so that people aren't just making up documents. I'm kind of fine with the 10,000 square feet, but I am concerned about the 20 feet setback from streets, public parks, and sidewalks. It seems as though that should be the 50 feet as well. And I think that's it. I think you guys have answered most of my other questions, so I'm good with that. I would like to see 50 feet for parks, sidewalks. I'm assuming that's also supposed to be for senior centers and daycare centers. I think that is part of that 50 set. But you guys made it only 20 feet, correct?
The 20 feet can be changed to 50 feet if that's the recommendation.
I think it would be better if it was 50 feet because that does make it the same thing as a habitable structure. People walking on sidewalks, parks, it would, to me, the same 50 feet. I would be pleased with a 50 foot on that. That's it.
Okay, before I go with my comments, I am actually going to open up the public testimony or public hearing again, because I have a question for Ms. Askren. So I'm going to go ahead and open up public hearing again. Ms. Askren, one of my questions is, and I should have asked this, my apologies. If somebody that has a beehive moves from their location, I'm assuming that they would take the beehive with them in some way, shape, or form, but do all the bees go with that hive, or are there going to be bees that just hang around looking for the new queen?
So moving bees is very much a part of the whole agricultural enterprise of pollination, which is how commercial beekeepers put their kids through college. But yes, even backyard beekeepers, if you were going to move your bees, you would move them at night. If you move the hive away from the bees, they still think it's there. So it's pretty much common knowledge that you close your hive up when it's dark and all the bees are inside, and you screen it off, and then you take them to where they're going at night. And it has to be 2 miles away from where they were before, or they will go back there. They'll keep going back because their radius is about 2 to 5 miles.
Okay.
But yeah, this is something that is, beekeepers know about that.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Since I opened it, if nobody else has a question, I'm going to close the public testimony again. And then I'll make
May I ask a question?
Certainly. You've given us your time and your expertise. We appreciate it. Go ahead.
Sure. I'm just curious. You have, you mentioned that there were 7 known beekeepers in Simi Valley, in the city of Simi Valley, and 700 beehives? Are
Staff?
those all in one? What?
I can actually answer part of that. Some of those beehives are not actually in the city, they're on county land. And they are commercial hives. Up Tapo Canyon, there's 2 big commercial hives up there, or with hundreds of boxes.
Right.
In open space.
I'm just curious if you know, if you do have any statistics at all on backyard beekeepers.
I don't think we do specifically.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Again, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and close the public testimony again. And my comments are, Ms. Askren, thank you very much for your time, your expertise, your professionalism. Staff, I think you guys did a great job on doing something. This is new ground. I mean, most of the cities don't allow it because I don't think it's ever been brought up. And those cities that do allow it, somebody's obviously brought it up and said, you know, we should be able to keep bees like everything else. I agree with Commissioner Rice and Tolson regarding and Commissioner Gray, pretty much everybody, regarding the requeening. Yes, I think a definition of a solid fence or some kind of dense shrubbery should be probably put in there. I don't want to overregulate this because this is something that's probably not going to happen a lot, and we would certainly want to encourage people to do it if they actually want to do it as a hobby or something to do without making it too problematic. Public notice timeframes, 10 days may be a little bit short, but I do agree we'll let the the city council decide on that because I kind of like consistency. When you start saying one is 10 days, one's 15, one's 20, it creates kind of a problem. Commissioner Gray made a comment about 50 foot from setback for sidewalks. Some properties, you don't have 50 foot from a sidewalk and a habitable structure. So I'd rather see it 50 feet from the habitable structure and closer to the sidewalk. So I'm not so inclined to say 50 feet from the sidewalk. I think that the 20 feet is probably good enough. One of my questions that I had in my mind is what happens if people move and they don't take their beehives with them? Well, pretty simple. They can take the beehives with them pretty readily, so I don't think that's a big deal. Overall, again, I think that we have kind of broken new ground here, and we followed some of the cities, but I think in Ventura County, since nobody else allows it, maybe this may be a beacon for them to allow beekeeping in their areas. Who knows? You would think Moore Park, some of the agricultural communities, Camarillo, Oxnard would allow beekeeping, but evidently they don't in residential areas. So all in all, I am in favor of option C with the proposed changes that we've already discussed. So with that, may I have
just a minute. Wait, Mr. Commissioner, I'm sorry, Chairman Mann.
Yes.
I think it'd be appropriate to determine what the consensus is with respect to Commissioner Gray's idea with respect to the 50 feet.
Okay.
From the street. I think it's a solid idea.
I'm okay with 50 feet from the structure and 20 feet from the sidewalk.
I'm with Commissioner Tolson and Commissioner Mann on the 20 feet. As a compromise, maybe that it can't be in the front yard.
Well, I think it's already said it's in the
I
rear yard.
mean, do we
only.
have that in there?
Yeah.
Is that, okay, then I missed that. I apologize. Okay, but I'm okay with the 20 feet. I think that's adequate.
It is to the rear yard, correct? I mean, one of the things is to the rear of the residence.
Rear of the
I'm
residence.
assuming that means
Okay.
rear yard?
Ms. Santos, what's the answer to that one?
That's my interpretation. That's correct.
Yeah, it needs to be, yes, in the rear yard,
Okay, well, rather than making
behind
some,
the 20 feet of, at least 20 feet, not within the 20-foot setback.
okay, I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Ms. Santos? 20-foot what?
Not within the 20-foot setback,
20-foot setback of what?
front yard.
Front yard, okay.
Wait, is
So
it front yard or front sidewalk?
Front property line.
Okay, hang on a minute.
So
So
it-
I'm getting some conflicting information. Does it have to be in the rear yard or it can be in the front yard as long as it's 20 foot off the sidewalk?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the resolution and it's the rear yard.
Okay, so it's clearly defined.
Yeah, so I'm reading the definition here. It shall be 15 feet or more from the front, hive entrance, or a distance of 5 feet or more from the side or rear hive. Bear with me, I'm sorry. Hive shall not be placed within 20 feet of the front property line and 7 linear feet from the side and rear property line. So the front property line, the hive cannot be located closer than 20 feet.
So if the property goes back 30 feet from the
It could be in the front.
sidewalk, you could put it in your front yard.
That
Yes,
is
that's how
technically
that's how it would
correct.
be interpreted.
I think that's a disaster.
Could we add in phrasing that it can't be visible from the street?
You could also just say that we could add a caveat that's not located within the front yard, which is a different definition,
Okay.
which is the front side of the house.
Okay.
So we
Yeah,
could-
I'd rather see it.
Yeah.
It cannot be in the front yard. It has to be in the rear yard or the rear of the property.
yeah, that should not be a problem to fix that definition.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Hodge that anything in the front yard is a huge problem.
Yeah.
Okay,
May I ask a question?
I'm sorry, who's asking that?
This is Ruth Askren.
Unfortunately, no, I've already closed the public testimony, so no, thank
Got
you,
it.
though.
Sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Hodge, does that answer your question about the rear yard?
Yeah, I think that makes it better.
And you realize your camera always sees the top of your head, by the way. It's like, where's Walt?
Well, it's the best part of me. So
Okay. It's like
Yeah.
where's Kilroy?
I'm doing my Alan Mann impression.
No, it would be, never mind, we'll move on. Okay. Do we answer the question about the setbacks to the satisfaction to move on with the resolution, reading the resolution?
I think so.
Okay, may I please have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 01-2021. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley recommending to the City Council approval of Development Code Amendment ZS 754 to amend portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code for establishing regulations to allow beekeeping, apiculture activities in single-family residential and open space zoning districts, and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act as amended.
The chair will now entertain a motion.
I move to adopt a resolution recommending approval of, as modified by the Planning Commission. Option C, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley recommending to the City Council approval of Development Code Amendment ZS 754 to amend portions of Title IX of the Simi Valley Municipal Code for establishing regulations to allow beekeeping, apiculture, activities in single-family residential and open space zoning districts, and a determination that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act as amended by the documentation of the new queen, the solid fencing, and a recommendation to the city council.
Also the front yard.
Oh, and that they not be located in the front yard.
I'm sorry, did you say
Specific
requeening
notice,
and,
specific notice to the city council of the 10-day notice, a question about the 10-day notice, that may not be enough.
And just for clarification, solid fencing means either solid fencing or some kind of dense foliage fencing
Correct.
to be approved by staff. Okay, we have a motion. So before we have conversations, let's have a second to the motion. We have a second to the
Second.
motion.
I second it.
Commissioner Tolson. Okay. Any questions or conversations or comments on the motion?
yeah, I'm just making for clarification. We said the requeening at least every 2 years.
Correct, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I just wasn't hearing that clearly. I just wanted clarification on that. That's all.
No problem. Any other questions on the motion as amended? Okay, let's vote. Oh, I can use my little button again. No, I don't. Okay, since we have people that are remote, we'll do verbal vote.
Oh, I can vote for them by proxy if they tell me their vote. So Commissioner, can I ask them?
By all means.
Commissioner Hodge?
No.
Commissioner, Vice Chairperson Tolson?
Yes.
Commissioner Gray?
Yes.
And I'm waiting for Commissioner Mann.
Do you have Commissioner Rice?
Did you push the lock button?
Oh,
Yeah.
there, my vote's locked. Okay,
Motion passes 4-1.
okay, there's no appeal period for the zoning text amendment, and the items will proceed to the city council with the planning commission's recommendations. Thank you, one and all. Do I have anybody that wants to motion for a quick 5-minute break, or are we moving on?
Commissioner Mann, before you do that, I'm going to have to respectfully leave the meeting. I have business requirements that prevent me from continuing this meeting. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Back to do I have a conversation for a quick break, or do we press on?
You're the chair.
I move we take 5 minutes.
5-minute break's fine.
Okay, then we're gonna adjourn for 5 minutes, and according to my phone, it is 8:28. We'll come back at 8:35. We'll do a 7-minute break. 8:35. Thank you. We're going to reconvene the Planning Commission meeting of February 17th, 2021. And we are off to new business. This is the time and place set for a public hearing on the consideration of CUPS 829, a request to remodel an existing 6,048 square foot commercial building and convert into a new restaurant/coffee house with a drive-through, and the determination that this project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Are there any ex parte communications to report?
No.
And as a point of clarification, Commissioner Hodge has left the meeting. May we have an oral report on this matter by staff?
Good evening, Chairman, members of the commission. This is a proposed reuse of an existing building over at the corner of Los Angeles Avenue and Yosemite Avenue. Our associate planner, Cesar Hernandez, is here for tonight's presentation. Cesar?
Thank you, Claudia. Good evening, Planning Commission. The applicant, Avante Development Partners Incorporated, submitted an application for a conditional use permit to remodel an existing 6,048 square foot commercial building and convert it into a new restaurant coffee house with a drive-through. Pursuant to Municipal Code, Section 9-52070, the Planning Commission in this case would be the decision maker and the review authority for such request. The project is located at 5821 East Los Angeles Avenue. And to give a brief background, the existing commercial building is vacant and was formerly a bank located on a 0.95 acre parcel. A shell of the building would remain with few modifications to accommodate the coffee house and drive-through lane. The project was presented before Neighborhood Council number 2 on January 12, 2021. The project site is part of an existing retail shopping center, and the center includes Vons, Rite Aid, and various retail shops. There is a gas station located on the corner of Yosemite Avenue and Los Angeles Avenue. There are existing townhomes located to the east of the project site. The project is originally part of the permit that would share the shopping center, and the parking is also shared between the parcels. There are 3 existing driveways along LA Avenue and 3 along Yosemite Avenue that provide access to the center. The applicant will be required to improve these 2 easternmost driveways on LA Avenue to conform to city standards as they are located in the applicant's parcel. And once again, the building shell will remain as it exists with few mods, while the internal portion of the building will be modified to accommodate the coffee house, patio, and drive-through. And note that there will be a proposed 240-foot long drive-through queuing lane, which exceeds the required 150-foot length. The proposed building remodel consists of a 1,977 square foot restaurant coffee house space, a 543 square foot patio to be used for outdoor dining, and a 3,528 square foot tunnel that will be used for the drive-through. Now, the entry to the coffee house and the outdoor patio will be facing the west elevation, and the coffee house will be in the middle of the existing building with new exterior walls that will separate it from the drive-through lane on either side. The drive-through lane would have an order window menu facing LA Avenue and the pickup window facing the north elevation, both located within the drive-through tunnel, and this would help attenuate any noise projection. Now, the closest residence is approximately 110 feet away from the easterly end of the building. As you'll notice that the proposed landscaping located along the south elevation of the building and to the rear of the drive-through lane Now, the applicant is proposing new landscape planner that includes 4 new 36-inch box trees interspersed with various bushes. Also, the applicant will be planting new trees along the right-of-way and will repair the existing wall that abuts the parking lot. Now, the open part of the drive-through will be screened by the aforementioned landscaping and the existing 5 to 6 foot tall masonry wall located on the property line. Now, the building will maintain its contemporary architectural design, and the building will be painted with tan and white colors. Now, as an added safety measure, the project will be conditioned to provide pedestrian caution signs at the drive-through entrance and exit. And this perspective shows the ingress and egress of the drive-through. Now, there are 4 window openings along the walls that include plaster screen walls located on the bottom. Now, this would help, of course, with ventilation as the vehicles pass through the tunnels. And this perspective shows that you notice the aluminum corrugated metal panels along the inside of the interior walls. And in this perspective, the building will maintain the split face concrete, plaster pilaster, and the cap and parapet cap and cornice. Now, this is the rear portion of the building, and this is the open area in which the radius will turn back into the tunnel. The project is exempt from CEQA based on Class 32 infill development. Staff recommends to the Planning Commission approval of CUP S829 based on the findings and conditions of approval included in the staff report. This concludes the presentation. Staff will take your questions.
Any commissioners, any questions to staff?
I've got a couple questions. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
By all means, Commissioner Tolson.
In the same parking lot is a Vons that has a Starbucks. Will that Starbucks indoors remain?
Yes, it would be. They're not part of the same owners.
Okay, thank you very much. That's it. That's the only question I have for staff.
Okay, Commissioner Rice is in my little queue on my screen here. He's playing with the new toys up here.
Yes, well, somebody's got to do it. And Mr. Hernandez, when I believe it was the gas station, when the gas station was remodeled, we had them, for some buildings, eventually we would like the utilities to be underground. And I believe that we had the gas station pay money into a fund so that eventually the power lines would be undergrounded. Would this project be required to pay any money into a fund so that eventually the power lines would be undergrounded?
That's a good question. There are existing power lines to the rear of this project, and as condition for this one, they will be required to underground as well. According to the applicant, Southern California Edison has agreed to drop the 16 kV line behind it as a project along LA Avenue.
Really?
Yeah. And further, when it gets time for the applicant to speak on behalf of this project, you can ask them further how that will work, at what point in the future when that will occur.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other commissioners have, sorry, Commissioner Gray?
So mine has to do with parking lots, that I'm only seeing one handicap parking spot. And I know that these types of places where people run in very quickly and out. When I looked up the California code, that it's supposed to be one handicap spot per 25 spaces. I understand the line, property line, how are we only looking at, because I think that's supposed to be 59 spaces, so there should be at least two, one being a van and one a normal regular handicap spot.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Gray. So the accessibility for the project will be reviewed when the project comes in for a building plan check, and it will meet whatever the California code, ADA code, it will be requiring, and it is looked at based on the number of parking spaces, and this particular remodel would not require that many parking spaces, but nevertheless, it's going to be looked at by building.
Okay.
Any other questions from any commissioners?
Yeah, actually, I did another one.
By all means.
I pushed the button again. Yeah, I know that Neighborhood Council number 2 brought up, I know that some of them wanted a right-hand turn lane. Why did staff not think that was necessary?
We'll refer to our principal traffic engineer, Justin Link.
Yes, Commissioner Rice, the reason why that request, I did not concur with that request is because it would disrupt the bike lane. And there is sufficient queuing on site to handle there's sufficient queuing on site to handle the projected queue for the project. So there wouldn't need to be any on-street queuing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Link.
Any other commissioners, any other questions of staff? With that, we will open the public testimony portion of the hearing. Would the applicant like to present the project?
Yes, we would.
By all means, go ahead. You have 15 minutes.
First, I just wanted to thank Caesar for the presentation and the work that he's put into this project, and wanted to thank the commission for the opportunity to present. I brought along my development team, which includes William Nascimento as a development consultant who is extremely experienced in Starbucks development and has done more than 5 of these in recent years. And also my architect, Scott Boydston, and the rest of my consulting team to answer any questions that the commission or the public may have. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott to run through a quick presentation that he has.
Oh, good, our screen's changed. Perfect.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. Thanks for taking on this project, and we look forward to getting it done and taking a building that is essentially dilapidated at the present time and giving it a function that I think will benefit the community. This is sort of our project team. One of the things that we've done in the past, and I think is something I can highlight on this, is that we have tried to reuse buildings rather than tearing them down. So we find that that's more sustainable, environmentally friendly. This project here in Ventura was an old Fresh and Easy, and we actually repurposed it, and first sort of came up with the notion of actually putting the tunnel behind the main facade of the existing building. This is the store was actually too deep to use, so that by putting the lane around the outside, it really started to create some viable spaces that could lease next to Starbucks, such as a Subway, Jersey Mike's, and a nail salon. But really the most interesting thing is that typically, drive-throughs are the bane of any sort of site, because you see these cars lining all along the sidewalk, and yet in this instance, you don't see the cars really at all. It looks like really just a commercial building with the holes cut out. The one on the bottom, actually, we took it to a new extreme in the city of Ventura on Ventura or Victoria Avenue, where we built a ground up Starbucks. But it really needed to match the guidelines for the corridor. So buildings were brought to the street, and we actually have louvers or storefront to pivot at night. So it has a storefront look to it. And you actually, again, the tunnel drives through it. And we actually put a public art piece in the tunnel itself, which was a glass mural. And then to really demonstrate that and bring activity, we actually put the patio and connected it to the sidewalk with a trellis. So really an urbanistic way to start looking at how do you do these drive-throughs when the fact of the matter is many of them are really ugly. So when we came to CME and were brought to this project, we really thought about how we could reuse this building. The architecture is unique. And then how could we do another Starbucks or reuse of the building? And it came about to actually put the drive-through lanes around inside on both sides, so that it really doesn't look like a drive-through. It looks like a building. One of the other things that was critical in this was that really we only had the opportunity to build within the footprint of the building. There were CC&Rs throughout the center that didn't allow us really to do anything. And so this sort of became a unique way to not only get a drive-through in, but also work with the tenants of the shopping center. You can see we have cutouts in the tunnel, which create another pattern, get light into the tunnel. We actually have a covered patio that we effectively had Starbucks push their building back so we could get a larger outdoor patio. It doesn't show it in this slide, but they'll actually have a walk-up window also and reduce seating inside because of the pandemic that we're in. Next slide. So you start to see the back, you actually come out. The sort of, from the back of the building to the alley, we do have some ability to make changes. So that's why we come out of the building and then back in so that we can get the maximum amount of queuing lanes in it. We have enough to queue up 11 cars at this point. And we wanted to increase the parking back there that was there before. Next slide. So these are just the elevations, and I think Caesar sort of showed them to you. I'm really excited about, sort of getting this building up and running and fixing it. I think the architecture is really unique. So it's all about on the outside of, being consistent with the kind of architecture that was there, and then adding to it. The metal panels inside we used on another project, and it's a Galvalume, so it sparkles and it really lightens up the tunnel as you drive through. Next slide. So I think that's basically the architecture side of it, and the whole team is here for questions. Thank you.
Okay, does the applicant have any other people that he wants to talk, or we're open for questions?
No, we're ready to open up for questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
I have my first question is, can we show back to the slides? I want to see where car number 12 lines up.
Well, we actually have 11 cars. So
I know that. Where does car number 12 go?
Well, car number 12, and maybe William can answer this, but we've developed a management program for where that car 12 goes. And there's going to be some dedicated spaces where it can actually park. So there'll be a person out with a tablet watching number 12 and taking their order, and then they'll go to the mobile spaces that are marked on this plan, and their order will be brought out to them. So it will be actively managed.
Okay. So 12 through whatever, 12, 13, 14,
16.
15, 16. 12 through 16 will go to the mobile order spots.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Starbucks is acutely aware of queuing issues and is taking it very seriously. And like Scott said, has developed a management plan in order to address those issues.
Yeah, I might also state, I've done a number of these, and Starbucks is actually actively working on their internal workings and how at peak times they can get more product out quicker than what they've been doing. And they recognize the issue. And one of the things that helps them, and somebody asked about the Starbucks and Vons, is that when they do these closer together, it takes the load off. And so that's why you see, the old Starbucks on every corner. It's because of they don't want people queuing up into the streets. It's not good for business.
One more question is in terms of, we've got X number of Starbucks in Simi Valley. What does this franchisee or ownership of this Starbucks, what's the community involvement that they currently do in Ventura or they have plans to do here in Simi Valley?
I guess I don't really know the answer to that. This is a corporate.
I can hear William in the office next to me. He's muted. This is a corporately owned store. So we're local here to Southern California. I'm an LA boy. And we would be the developers and owners of the building. And then it would be leased out to Starbucks on a triple net basis. But to answer your question, generally corporately owned Starbucks always have a community involvement portion to the way that they operate their franchises, including community fundraisers, teachers' nights, different things like that they do. So that's typically something that Starbucks does implement in all their locations, especially ones that would be considered more flagship, like this location. They really try to create a sense of community around stores like this.
So this is a Starbucks, not a franchise or corporate?
This is a corporately operated store, and we as the developer are leasing out the building to Starbucks. So we would construct it and we would lease it to them and we would retain ownership of the building.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I have a concern, and that has to do with the driveway. Why is it that it's 36 feet, sorry, at the opening, but then it's only 25 from the curb to curb in front of the store? How is traffic supposed to go through there? And maybe it's the 36 feet is plenty of space for opening, and maybe I'm just not used to the existing openings. I know that it's 25 feet over on the back end exit. But that middle section right there, driveway 5 is what I'm looking at. The driveway 5 to the keep clear area, it reduces by 11 feet.
Yeah, that was an existing condition when we inherited the property, and maybe our traffic engineer, Mark Mizuta, could speak to that. But in my understanding, generally, when you have an entry-exit driveway off of a busy street, you want to allow a bit more room as cars are either accelerating or decelerating. And then those cars can tighten up as they enter the main drive line of a shopping center. And Mark, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
That's already existing though, correct? Because I'm looking
Yes.
at the photograph of the existing building, the top page, and it looks like that's what's already there. So you're not dealing with any of the parking itself. You're just dealing with the building.
Correct. We would not be
Okay.
disturbing any of that other than, probably restriping as required by the building department.
Yeah, yes, this is Mark Mizuta. I actually don't really have anything more to add besides what you just said, Chris, because yes, typically the driveways at the public street is wider and then, it can narrow down. But it would be, wide enough to accommodate obviously two-way traffic.
Can you hear me? This is William.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So I think the question is in terms of also we worked with Mr. Justin Link to make sure that cars can enter and exit using an auto turn program safely so that the width is sufficient to allow a car to come in and turn into the drive-through lane. They stop before they get out, and traffic from the center can continue to travel north, south, and go to Bonds or Rite Aid as they need to. I don't know if you see on the screen the auto turn exhibit that I'm showing.
Can I ask a question?
By all means, yes.
Okay. If I could, gentlemen. I asked the question earlier about the undergrounding of utility lines, and so you've had a discussion with Edison about the utility lines behind the property, is that correct?
Well, let me be clear. Let me show you there is apologize, give me a second.
It's okay.
There's a line in the back of the property.
Yes.
And we have one pole in our property.
Mhm.
So for our project, we're going to underground our pole.
Yes.
But the poles behind Rite Aid that are further down the line, the second pole, those poles will remain until such time there is a ability to condition, I believe, a project. But
Right.
this pole in our property will be underground. We'll be, we've already coordinated that with Southern California Edison.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'll go. In one of the slides, and I can't remember which one, there was a red overlay that basically said keep clear. Is there going to be any signage in the front? That's good because it's not on my screen. Is there any signage in the front that basically says that is not a queuing up area, that is not an area to go ahead and park? At some point, the Starbucks employees would either move cars to the mobile area, or are there signs that say basically you can't stop here to queue up?
Can you see on the screen the drive-through management plan?
Yes.
Slide?
Yes.
Awesome. So the intent is to work with staff as the project goes through permitting and ensure that we comply with the plan that we put together in response to the neighborhood council meeting that is fundamentally supported by the operations, store management, and signage and striping. And when you point out, we do want to mark the areas keep clear, but as well as it was pointed out previously, if any cars start blocking the keep clear area, two partners from the Starbucks will come out with vests and direct traffic away from any kind of traffic blocking that occurs. We can work with Mr. Justin Link and propose signage that would even enhance that further by having actual normal traffic signs that prohibit stopping in the keep clear area and encourage folks to, if there is for some reason an inability for the drive-through lane to clear for somebody to be able to drive in, that we make sure this driveway keeps clear.
And if I remember correctly, reading somewhere, it says the average queuing for Starbucks was either 8 or 10 cars.
Actually, the city required us to do a study, a stacking study that we performed an analysis. And based on statistical analysis, and Mark Mizuta, our traffic engineer, could speak to that more, we found that the comparable Starbucks in Simi Valley at peak, I don't know what the percentage is, but go up to about 11 cars, 10 cars maximum. Mark, can you clear that up for us? And the other thing that I think I want to mention real quick, and it's been brought up before, is that once you open this Starbucks, some of the traffic that goes to other Starbucks now will actually come here and will lighten the load on any other Starbucks where the lanes may be, 11, 12 already now. So those traffic stacking will be reduced by the opening, the capacity increased by this Starbucks. Mark?
Yeah, so what William was referring to, so yes, we did do a queuing, drive-through queuing study at existing Starbucks in the city at 3 other locations, the Cochrane, Simi Valley Town Center, and the one on East Los Angeles Avenue back in October 2019. And basically we did that during the morning peaks. And I guess the average is about 6. So the 50%, there's about 6 vehicles in the drive-through lane. And then, but if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, about 11 would be about the maximum that we found from 3, averaging the 3 at the 3 sites there. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to open up the public comment. Did we receive any requests from members of the public to make a public statement on Zoom?
No, there's not.
Okay, are there any comments from staff regarding statements made during public hearing? Or would the applicant like to respond to any comments?
I think we're good. I don't believe there's any comments to respond to.
Okay. Would the applicant like to respond to any comments regarding statements made during the public hearing?
No, I think all the feedback was reasonable, and I hope the commission is satisfied with the responses from our consultants.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we are going to close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We are now going to open up for comments and questions for members of the Planning Commission only. Any Planning Commissioner wish to go first? You didn't hit your button request to speak.
I didn't. There you go.
Yeah, it's not on.
I was already queued up.
Okay.
All right. Sorry.
Commissioner Rice?
I apologize. One, I like the fact that that utility line, even if it's only 30 feet, is getting undergrounded. That's great. 11 vehicle queue. I believe that'll be the longest queue in Simi Valley. That's great, especially for a Starbucks. That's wonderful. On the project itself, I love the fact that you're reusing a building that already exists. That's fantastic. And I like the way you set the landscape up, and I especially appreciate that you're putting in 36-inch box trees and not putting in smaller trees. The only advice I have, which is minimal, is that you curry the favor of your neighbors behind that back wall, and maybe meet with them before you open your project. But other than that, I really like this project.
Commissioner Tolson or Gray, any comments?
I'll forego to Commissioner Gray first.
I actually like this project. We're in such a rush for some reason, even during a pandemic, to just get in and out of things. Well, specifically since we can't go anywhere that much anyways, but coffee is such an important part of people's lives these days, or tea. I do like that it doesn't look like a drive-through. I think that's a really cool concept. I have not seen this, and I know that you presented the 2 that are in Ventura, and I have not seen those. So and one of them's next to my mother-in-law, so I'm gonna have to go check that out. I do like the fact that it's underground electricity, the power lines. I live up in an area that we don't have any power lines, and when we get these horrendous winds that whip through my neighborhood, like you can't believe, it wakes me up, the house shaking. We don't ever worry about the power issues like we have in Simi Valley. So it's really good to see developers starting to put those power lines underground, so that we don't have as many power outages. I'd like to see Edison in general working on our residential areas, so that we can get rid of the power lines. I think it's a nice project. My only concern, and you said it's not that big of a deal, would be this is south facing, and how much glitter is that? Where is that page? On your materials sheet. As long as it's not too reflecting, so that we don't have the same issues that they had with the Disney Center, but it doesn't look like it's that shiny to begin with, the panels. I do like the fact that it'll bring light in. So yeah, I think this is a really cool project.
I'm up. I like the new landscaping. I like the power lines going underground for a whopping 30 feet. My only challenge, which I think you've addressed, is your management of the queue. I've seen lines at the Starbucks on Cochrane longer than 12 cars. I've seen queues over at the Starbucks at First in LA, which they've got the fortunate of having zero foot traffic. They go back 12, 14 cars. If I go to either of those and I only see 6, I'm jumping in line because it's unusual. So, the combination between adding another Starbucks, which is going to alleviate that, not having the one in the same parking lot closing is going to alleviate that, and the fact that you've got the management team with the 12 through 15 is spectacular. The articulation is good. It's not spectacular, but you're using an existing facility or an existing building, so I'm very happy with the project. I wish we have a closed Fresh and Easy that we would have loved for you to do something with, but that's not going to happen tonight. I spoke to a fireman that's worked across the street at that fire station, and it says, is there going to be a problem if the queue comes out to 11, 12, 15, 15? He goes, you know what? It's amazing how lights and sirens make people move. So he didn't think there was going to be any problem with that. I am in favor of this project. Thank you very much for coming. And again, thank you for taking a building that's been there for a long time and making it useful and good for us.
Okay, it's up to me. I love the fact you're repurposing an old building. I've actually been to the one in Ventura. Because it doesn't look like a Starbucks, I missed it. I had to drive around the block to come back to find it, which is a good thing or a bad thing. The good thing is it doesn't look like a Starbucks, so it tends to blend in really, really well. Excuse me. with the surrounding areas. So kudos for that. Bottom line is it is what it is. I think you guys have done a great job with the queuing. 11, 12, 13 cars. I mean, you seem to have the handle on it. Obviously, this is what you guys do, so I'd expect nothing less. The Foresight architecture is fine, being that there's an existing building. You're kind of stuck with some of the things on it, but I think you guys have gone above and beyond with what you need to do and should do and can do. I do agree with Commissioner Rice. Reach out to the neighbors behind because they've had the benefit of an abandoned building there, so no noise. There's going to be some noise there. So a little bit of community outreach would be good. Discount coupons work out well for those condos that you back up to. Other than that, I'm certainly in favor of the project. With that in mind, may I have a reading of the resolution?
Resolution number SVPC 03-2021, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Simi Valley approving conditional use permit number CUPS 829, a request to remodel an existing 6,048 square foot commercial building and convert it into a new restaurant/coffee house with a drive-through located at 5128 East Los Angeles Avenue, and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
The chair will now entertain a motion.
I move to adopt a resolution approving CUP-S-829 and a determination that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act.
Motion was made by Vice Chair Tolson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second by Commissioner Rice. Call for the vote, please.
Remember, you got to lock it.
I already locked it. I learned.
Commissioner Tolson says yes.
Commissioner Gray?
Yeah, I actually just wanted to make that one comment in regards to making sure that we look at the handicap spaces. So as long as that's taken care of, I'm a yes.
It will be taken care of as part of the plan. Sorry, Jen.
Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Hodge not present.
The appeal period for CUP-S 829 is 14 calendar days.
Thank you.
We're proceeding to the next item. Oh, we have no other new items. That is the last of the new business. Oral communication reports. Does staff have anything to report? Is your microphone on? Is your microphone on? It's not often I get to say that to you people.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, you received a tentative agenda for the next Planning Commission meeting on March 3rd, 2021. We have a couple items on that evening, including a public hearing for a larger industrial project. Next, you should have also received notification of the dates for the 2021 Planning Commissioners Academy. This is a virtual academy this year, and it's on March 25th, 26th, March 31st, April 1st. Please let us know if we would like you'd like to register to view that online during those dates. And lastly, to follow up with Commissioner Rice's question a couple meetings back, Monday we did receive notification from the Arbor Day Foundation that we received our 2020 Tree City USA award for several consecutive years to keep our streak alive, and we will be following up with the proceedings for the award distribution and presentation.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
And that's all I have.
Do any commissioners have anything to report? Do my eyes deceive me? But next meeting, March 3rd, we actually have a mobile home rent mediation board annual report.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So moving on. Sorry, any other planning commissioners have anything to say? Okay, mobile home rent mediation board. Nothing. Tree advisory board.
Well, I think I already mentioned that item, so.
Okay, just making sure. Then adjournment. This concludes the meeting of February 17th, 2021. Next scheduled meeting is March 3rd, 2021. This meeting is adjourned.